When French fur trappers first encountered these huge, shaggy animals in North America during the early part of the 17th century, they weren't quite sure what to make of them. They called them bœuf, French for ox. Over time, French words become anglicized in North America, and I wonder if this is where the name buff, and later buffalo, may have first originated. Despite their common name, however, these animals are only distant relatives of the true buffalo, which are found only in Africa and Asia. In North America today, there are actually two subspecies of American bison. The first is known scientifically as Bison athabascae. Standing up to 2 meters in height and weighing as much as 1,100 kilograms, wood bison are the largest terrestrial animals in North America today. Now found mainly in Canada, they once roamed the boreal forests of eastern Alaska and northwestern Canada. But they were never as numerous as Plains bison. Even at their peak, they numbered less than 200,000 animals. At first glance, they may look like any other bison, but the hump of the wood bison is more square, with the high point located well ahead of its front legs. Their beards are also thinner and more pointed, and the hair on their foreleg chaps is shorter. Today, there are only about 11,000 wood bison left in Canada, where their conservation status is listed as threatened. The other subspecies of American bison, known scientifically as bison, is the more commonly known Plains bison, which were once amongst the most numerous animals in North America. And prior to Western industrial expansion, it's thought they numbered in the tens of millions. To the indigenous peoples of the Great Plains, who coexisted with them for millennia, bison were ingrained in daily life, providing not only food, shelter, clothing, and trade goods, but also becoming an integral part of both identity and culture. As colonial settlers began pushing west, together with drought cycles and the unregulated market hunting of the 19th century, Plains bison almost became extinct. By 1884, it's believed that only several hundred animals had survived. Of the few that remained, some were kept in zoos, while others were held in privately owned herds, some of which were bred with domestic cattle. It was believed, therefore, that of the bison remaining on public lands, perhaps only 2 genetically pure herds still remained. One in the recently established Yellowstone National Park, where the remaining 24 animals had to be protected from poaching by the U.S. Army, and the other in Canada's Elk Island National Park. This herd had been raised by Michel Pablo and Charles Allard on the Flathead Reservation of northwestern Montana. But after the U.S. government introduced the Dawes General Allotment Act, turning North American reservations into allotments and selling the surplus land to homesteaders, it became clear that bison herds would no longer be allowed to range freely in the West. Pablo and Allard wanted to sell their herd of 600 purebred animals to the U.S. government, an initiative supported by President Theodore Roosevelt. But when Congress refused to appropriate the necessary funding for their purchase, they were sold to the Canadian government instead. After millennia of living on the Great Plains, bison are well adapted to life here. They can tolerate the heat and require less water than many other animals. And neither the weather nor the natural landscape provide much in the way of obstacles. They are excellent swimmers, and although they may appear slow and ponderous, can run at speeds of 50 kilometers an hour and have no trouble clearing fences. Nomadic grazers, bison spend up to 11 hours each day feeding on grasses and sedges. And since they have multi-chambered stomachs, when they're not eating, they're ruminating, regurgitating partially digested food to chew again. Because they often graze the same areas repeatedly, their behavior instills vigorous new plant growth, providing them with a highly nutritious food source. Quite often, plant seeds can be seen clinging to their fur, which they then transport to other areas as they graze. While grazing, they disturb the soil with their hooves, providing space for these transported seeds to germinate and grow. Still others are transported and fertilized in their nutrient-rich droppings. Bison have also developed a symbiotic relationship with birds. Their repetitive grazing creates habitat for shortgrass prairie birds, such as this horned lark, and burrowing owls, who use the bison's manure to line their nests, perhaps to attract beetles and other insects to feed on. Other birds help groom them by feeding on insects they find hidden in their coats, while others catch a ride on them, waiting for insects to be kicked up from the soil. Still others, like this prairie falcon, are hoping this wood bison will perhaps stir up a rodent or two for dinner. But when birds are not around to help groom them, insects can become unbearably itchy, and sometimes they just need to scratch. This stone has been worn smooth by their rubbing. But when no rubbing stones are available, they improvise and use whatever they can find that's handy. To further relieve itching and shed loose fur, they will often roll on the ground in a process known as wallowing. Sometimes, during these dust baths, bison will destroy young woody plants, ensuring that shrubs and trees don't get a hold on the grasslands. After snowmelt in the spring, and again during seasonal rain showers, these shallow depressions fill with water, creating thousands of microhabitats all across the prairie. Mating takes place from late July and into August, with the right to breed often hotly contested by the males. This bull is a contender who feels he should have the right to mate with this herd. The herd bull, however, sees things a little differently. The challenge doesn't last long, however, as the herd bull, exerting his dominance, quickly sends the challenger on his way. During the mating season, the herd bull will check the cows until he finds one close to estrus. He will then stay with the cow until she's ready to mate, before moving on in search of another. Calves are usually born in late April or early May, when fresh grass is plentiful, from which cows will produce their milk. A short distance from the herd, this cow has just given birth. One of her first priorities will be to clean the calf and get it to imprint on her so it will recognize her when they rejoin the herd. Although it's still a little uncoordinated, it's very important the calf begins feeding right away. The cow's colostrum milk is rich in antibodies and will build immunity in the calf until it's able to develop its own immune system. But the calf's stomach will only accept these antibodies during the first hours of life. So timing is everything. With a little nudging, she's able to encourage the calf to begin nursing. As the day progresses, the cow will finish the birthing process by expelling the remaining part of the placenta. But for now, she's content to spend the rest of the morning bonding with her newborn calf. As they rejoin the herd, they see the calf now has some new playmates to spend the summer with. Herds are important as they provide protection from predators. But throughout the year, herd sizes vary with the season. In winter, they average only about 20 animals, but increase in size as summer approaches, and continue to do so until the fall rut, when herds may grow to include several hundred animals. Then, in late fall, they begin to disperse again. Bulls form small bachelor herds, while cows, calves, and yearlings form nursery herds, usually led by a matriarch. As fall arrives, the coats of this year's calves have now darkened to match those of the adults, and although they're not fully weaned yet, their mothers won't provide milk for much longer. So it's important they supplement their remaining milk diet with increased grazing. After enjoying a carefree summer, winter will now become their first true test. In winter, life becomes much harder. To reach the dried grasses buried below, they first need to clear the snow, which they do by swinging their heads like huge pendulums. Even in winter, bison still need to consume 10 kilos of feed each day, and most are not in the mood to share. While the dried grasses likely provide all the dietary fiber they need, they may lack some of the nutrients that are essential for bone and muscle growth. So some will supplement their diet by licking the nearby rocks. But winter feeding is exhausting work, and our young calf now looks as if he's ready to fall asleep on his feet. But he's strong, in fine condition, and stands a very good chance of making it to spring, which now is not that far off. While it's unlikely bison will ever return to their former numbers, thanks to repopulation attempts, together with enforced protection, today in the US and Canada, it's estimated there are now about 350,000 Plains Bison. In the U.S., most can be found in closely managed herds on federal and state preserves, as well as on private ranches. Meanwhile, in both Canada and the U.S., many First Nations are now also managing their own herds, rekindling their spiritual and cultural connections. Here in Canada, the Elk Island herd is used to provide a nucleus from which bison restoration continues. This herd has been used successfully to reintroduce bison to several of Western Canada's national parks, including grasslands, Banff, and Waterton Lakes. Together, these initiatives are helping to restore healthy bison herds to their former ranges, where once again they now roam this landscape, just as their ancestors did for millennia.